So in this video I'll show you how to put a cover on your book, hardcovers that I've cut for you. These two, I'll have front and back cover. I'm going to cover this book with some paste paper that we made the other day. And I'll have a bone folder, X-Acto knife, brush, ruler, pencil, and the PVA white glue, which I like to keep in a glue pot with a little bamboo dowel so that I can push the glue off onto that and not on the edge. So first thing, we'll need to mark the paste paper. This is the back side. Put all my markings on the back side. And my paper is, pretty consistent all the way to the bottom, so I'm just going to start my marking at the bottom. And a 1/2 inch is just fine. Some people like their book turn-ins to be more than a 1/2 inch, but I think that's a little much. So I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch. And this will give me the placement for my two boards. So this is the back. I don't have to measure, I can just trace the top and then bring that out with the ruler. What's important though is to figure out what sort of gap you need for your hinge. And the hinge doesn't have anything in it but the end paper on this side and the book paste paper on this side. So it's basically just a double thickness of paper. If you had a thicker book, maybe you'd want a cardboard spine in there, but it's not necessary for such a thin book. To figure out how much hinge you need, you've got to measure the book paper has to go all the way over from one book board across your book, across the other book board, and down. And if it's too tight, it's not going to function. And if it's too loose, you'll have kind of a big gap right here, which isn't very sightly. So the easiest way to do that is to don't totally squeeze on your book, but just gently grab it, and then with a piece of paper you can crease and then measure that gap and see what you get. I'm going to reinforce that with a little bit of graphite. And what I have is 3/8 of an inch. Maybe I'm going to err just wee on the side of a little bit bigger so that I can see my marking. So I'm going to make mine 3/8 of an inch. So I'm going to start from the middle and go out. And I also am going to cut my cover board in half, so then I'll have 2 of those on the outside. This one I marked so I could be a little faster. So I marked the middle of the board here and here, and I like using a mechanical pencil because it's accurate. And if I even want to be more accurate, sometimes I'll just stab it with an X-Acto knife, as long as I can see it. So that's my marking that is not going to interfere with the marking I made just for the paper grain. That's why I make them very freehand. This is important. If you're cutting board, make sure not to hurt yourself. So put pressure on the ruler, but make sure not to have any body part in front of the blade. And then make sure to have the blade upright. Your hand wants naturally turn one way, and you can get a very uneven cut if you're moving your wrist. So try to lock your wrist and don't press down too hard, just give it a little bit of pressure, and then you can kind of feel as it goes through to the cutting pad, and you should be able to have a really accurate cut that way. So back to the back side of my paper. And I want 3/8 of an inch, 2 gaps, and then to be able to have a 1/2 inch on either side for the turn in, and a 1/2 inch on the top. So the entire piece of paper with the 3/8 inch gaps will have a perimeter of 1 inch. So I'm kind of eyeballing it at the moment. And I will just trace my middle board and then go out from there. So that's easiest. And make sure it's 3/8. Give it a line. 3/8 on the other side. I should start up here. I'll often mark a piece of tape because of if there's only one marking on your tape, you can A, see what you're doing really well, and B, avoid mistakes. There's a mark. Or just see the top mark. Okay, so then my 2 hinges. I'll just take this top marking all the way across. And then I can position my 2 sideboards, which are going to be the cover. Trace them. I'll do this one so you can see it. And then make sure that that's a 1/2 inch. And I will trim it down to a 1/2 inch because it might show underneath the end sheet. Whoops, I missed that one. And with this cover paper, I don't think it's that important what orientation it has, but I'll check it to see if maybe I like the movement going one way rather than the other way. And then the top needs a 1/2 inch marking as well. And then cut it out. So that's my back hardcover piece. My two side panels that will get glued in. My book will go here eventually. And I'll have a gatefold, so they'll meet just in the middle with no closure. Okay. That's a good start.